It's Adrienne Lopez here, the Integrative Awareness Coach, Healing Coach. How are you doing today? Welcome. Tonight, I just wanted to pop on for a little bit. I was feeling super jazzed about my interview today with my special guest on my podcast, Maitra Wolf. We were talking about what happens when we start looking through, we start looking at our lives, the events, the circumstances, the relationships, um, what we might label failures or catastrophes through the initiatory lens. And it was a super enjoyable conversation. If you didn't catch it yet, it's posted on my Facebook page, Mind Heart Space, as well as my YouTube. If you haven't checked out my YouTube yet and you're listening to this live, either on the live or on the replay, do me a favor and go ahead and um, like and share, become a subscriber if that calls to you, to my YouTube channel. I'm super excited about growing that over there and sharing all of these incredible conversations I've been having about empowered living, the evolution of consciousness, and that it's not, I think, one of the big takeaways today. Well, there was many big takeaways today, but some of the things that we covered that I'm really enthusiastic about and that um, I think are super important is that having the courage to become self-reflective, to take responsibility for the conditions and the events and things unfolding in your life is actually a contribution to the collective, because consciousness is a field. And when we're taking care of our little corner of consciousness, it shifts the entire field. Hey, how's it going? If you stop by, say hi, let me know who's here. I'm always interested, and to see how you're doing and what you're up to. I can't always see people when I'm on my laptop, so it helps to say hello. I was just sharing about the really awesome interview I had today with my special guest. We were talking about what happens when you start looking at your life through an initiatory lens. And then it's kind of provides you a sense of rest and support, because you realize that life is happening for you, through you, to awaken to the truth about who you are. And let's face it, all of us have taken on um, the projections of the people around us, who other people gifted us to be in our role in their lives. And that's just one bandwidth of living, right? We're so much more than our role. We are stepping into our soul purpose, and that is true liberation and freedom, the kind that the personality can't even imagine, because the personality wasn't crafted for that. And so the process that's happening on the planet is the slow for some, considering how many years I've been doing this work personally, um, probably since I was in the womb, right? A lot of us came here to do this transformative work, through our presence and on the planet, and holding the spark, the imprint of soul remembering. And today, during our interview, my guest was talking about, and both of us were talking about, um, the sacredness of plant medicine and how it's being used and how it's being approached um, by some circles and some people as all this mass attention and what can only be said like gone mainstream. Ayahuasca's gone mainstream. Everybody and their brother um, is reporting these ayahuasca journeys, and nothing's the matter with that at all. But I invite you to tune into our conversation for the more nuanced um, aspects of what's going on with this pull uh, for consciousness to awaken at a more accelerated pace. And a lot of people are choosing to do plant medicine. It's not necessarily required or all the time needed or necessary. It's a very unique individual journey, let's say. Um, Anyways, I was very fascinated with. I think I did a whole episode on the Rig Veda and the reference to plant consciousness. That there's a beautiful verse in the Rig Veda which I shared in one of my podcasts about how the plants have came to Earth before humans because they were here to remind us of our true nature. And all of nature, right, is when we go out and we see a beautiful sunset or we take a walk in the forest or we see a beautiful animal, we're reminded of our natural rhythm, our natural pace, the pure beingness of life that can't be reduced to a concept or an idea or a role. It's just pure beingness. And so there is suffering in the world. Let's just be honest. You know, people are carrying heavy burdens in their life, whether they're conscious of them or not. But for example, if you took a moment right now just to close your eyes and put your hand on your heart and take a couple of deep breaths through your nose and out your mouth, and you just noticed, like, what are all the things that you're carrying in your psychic space? Your worries, your have tos, your judgments, your, right? It's endless. Our consciousness is the invisible space, and it's filled with heavy burdens and obligations that we've taken on as a way of operating. And no wonder why many people are exhausted and overwhelmed and suffer from all sorts of emotional and psychological symptoms. And, you know, I mean, who wouldn't want to drink? Who wouldn't want to befriend, you know, some sort of mind-altering substance? But the fact is if we're using that to escape the truth of who we are, and that we're holding all of these burdens that aren't even ours, and we've identified with them, and we're struggling with them, and that when we begin to realize that this process that we're walking through, this evolutionary process, like this is an earth school, and we are learning every situation, every event, every person, right? We have a choice whether we can look at it through a victim lens, victim perpetrator lens, or as I was speaking to my guest today, my Trobov, about the initiatory lens, where we begin to see that all events, the joyful ones, and let's just be honest, the painful ones, where people create a lot of interpersonal pain and wounding and drama of he said, she said, enemy images, like all of that is one version of what's happening. But really, most people are stuck in the filter of their own wounding, that they're just, and I don't want to say just because it's not a just, it's it's an inevitability if people aren't conscious of what they're functioning inside. Like those structures, those mental and emotional structures that are your personality, were gifted to you by the people around you. And today we also talked about the initiation of Inanna, the myth of Inanna, also known as Ishtar. She is the life principle associated with the archetype of Venus, the divine feminine. And it's a beautiful story because it illustrates the journey that we're all on and what happens when we get disconnected from the underworld, when we get disconnected from the shadow, when we get disconnected from the parts of us ourselves that we were told were unacceptable or not okay. The pain of the fragmentation that exists there, because we don't get to pass go, we don't get to collect $200 unless we take all of ourselves with us through the gateway, through the door. And this journey is as old as human consciousness. It's not new, and the wisdom is all around us. If we look, it's a resource in the invisible space, in the invisible spaces, the invisible resources that are there. And during our conversation today, I was sharing with my guest, or I think it was after our conversation, it was like I didn't have a name for the process that I was going through for most of my life. I didn't know what it was called, but I was on the path of initiation through this age-old wisdom that was rising up in my life to meet me, because I had called it in, because I was ready. I was ready to start living at a deeper, more soul rooted self. And that's what really, really what I believe people are craving in their hearts. The ability to sink down into their own soul and root themselves in their own being and feel confident and safe. And when we have that groundedness and that inner coherence, then we become unstoppable. And it can be a difficult process. And there's days where we're going to be really struggling. And then there's going to be days where we're going to be victorious over the mechanisms that we've inherited, that we're trying to operate in. And they feel so constricted and so real. And I'm not trying to insinuate that people's conditions and the things in their life that are happening aren't real. But when we look at them from the personality level, because we're like both, we have this individual, personal interaction, and then we also have a wider lens of the impersonal, and that everything that we're going through isn't unique. Like, everyone is going through some version of it. And I posted a link this week on my Facebook page. You may have seen it. It was about which post was it? It was the one on Christ Force Energy. And it's interesting when I talk about this energy. Sometimes people are like, oh, I didn't know you were so religious. And I think it's funny because religion has nothing to do with this vibration of unconditional love. And it doesn't belong to any tradition. It is a human asset. And what happens when it gets divided off and pushed into churches and other places, realms that are the, domain of certain institutions separate us from our own nature, because our own nature is unconditional love. It is that vibration. And we have to learn through social conditioning, through attuning to those around us as little ones, right? We learn to separate from ourselves in order to survive. And it's not even a conscious process. And so part of the work that I do, and a lot of healers are doing right now, are supporting people through the facilitation of walking this path of realizing the expanse of their own consciousness and their own truth and their own wisdom that's internal. And there's this part of the conversation about the plant medicine and the ayahuasca is that it's being used on some level as another level to avoid the experience of what's happening in one's life. Right? It can be a real slippery slope, this constant spiritual development, like something's wrong with you, and nothing's wrong with you. Nothing needs to be fixed. It's the ability to actually come in to who you are on a full, to the fullest degree. And that means moving out everything that's in the way, that's not you. And what happens is, because it means facing some hard truths and some difficult and often painful perceptions that we've held about not only ourselves but others in the world. And that in actuality, as I was talking to someone yesterday in a group, doing some group work, was that sounds kind of funny and obvious, but the weight of it hit him. He's like, oh my God, I am the one creating all my own suffering by the way I'm choosing to perceive other people's actions. And that, like, I have that much power to decide if I am going to be constantly reacting to other people's behaviors and triggers. Oh, as triggers, I mean. Because there's no freedom in that. It's just constantly having to protect yourself from being hurt. So, there's something that happens when you sink down below all of this surface level busyness of the personality, the judgments, the orchestrations, the strategies, the agendas. Like, what happens when you begin to sink down below that voice in your head that's constantly telling stories, or one story about the way the world is, and you begin to just rest into your own experience that is a felt sense that goes beyond the constant storytelling of your mind. And we need our minds. They're a valuable tool. As they say, they are a they are a great servant, but a terrible master. And so, I mean, really, you could ask yourself, like, have I really taken the time to sit with myself and get to know myself like a friend? Like maybe the people that I wish around me that would actually be able to be present enough to actually know and be with me, instead of constantly running their internal programs about getting their needs met or not getting their needs met, or if I'm going to satisfy their ego requirements. And that's a painful way of interacting. And it's only one level of interacting. But these programs aren't are, let's just say, they're hardwired in our brain. They're habitual. And then we think that they're us. We think, right? We call them our personality. But they are a moment in time that became ingrained in our nervous system. And then we began to identify it as, oh, that's just the way I am. When in actuality, an event happened, and a reaction occurred, then a thought or a story occurred to explain something that most likely we didn't understand. Right? All of the foundation of our personality gets put in place before our brain is actually developed, before we're able to properly process cognitively information in a way that allows us to understand the world in actuality. And then once you begin to notice this, you realize how little that most people actually relate to what's happening authentically in the present moment, because they're stuck in the past. They're bringing all of these lenses with them, and so they're not available for anything new, anything different, anything beyond what their personality will let them. And so this topic, looking at life through the initiatory lens, begins to become a spiritual tool for uncovering the truth about your essence, who you are, and what you're here to do. And the personality lens is based on protecting its boundaries and maintaining its stories, regardless of how alienating that is, regardless of how it might exclude authentic connection, love, adventure, play, joy, learning, and being present to the beauty of life, moment to moment. And so this is really, for me, a commitment to soul liberation, the freedom to be fully, to be a soul fully embodied in my mind and my heart, and to own that space fully without it being relegated to societal conditioning, what I'm allowed to say and not say. I'm worried about hurting somebody's feelings, or seen as bossy, or whatever my personality has going on about who I'm allowed to be based on, the survival instinct that I had to abide by in order to survive emotionally and psychologically in my family, just like us all. So, if you stopped by, thanks for taking a little listen. And if you heard something here that resonated with you, or made you stop and consider something a little more than you had before, let me know. Leave an emoji, say hi, leave a comment. Feel free to share. And I also invite you to take a listen to this week's episode of the Lifting the Veil podcast, which is posted on my YouTube channel, as I mentioned, as well as my Facebook page, Mind Heart Space. And check it out. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave those as well. I'm always happy to hear from you. And there's some shifting and changing happening in the work that I do I'm not quite sure how it's going to show up yet, but it's coming. I have a couple of programs that I'm firming up that I offered at the beginning of this year, which was a force of nature. And then there was also my year-long mentorship program. So I'm working on the latest rendition of those, updating them from the initial run of both of those offerings. So keep your eyes open for that. And until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are. It's great seeing you here. Thanks for stopping by again, and bye for now.